stars had belonged to them for 3,000 years. 5 great species ruled the galaxy with laws written in stone and traditions that never changed. The Vakram stood tall like giant insects, their bodies covered in natural armor that shined under distant suns. They called themselves the greatest warriors in all the known worlds. The Helios were beings made of crystal and light, thinking in numbers and patterns that predicted every battle before it began. The Krell swam through the depths of their ocean worlds and commanded the largest fleet of warships anyone had ever seen. The Montari traded goods across 1,000,000 planets, their 6 arms always counting profit. The Zenith were the diplomats, speaking in soft voices that somehow made everyone listen. Together, these 5 species had created what they believed was perfection. War still happened, but it was clean, organized, civilized. When 2 groups had a dispute, they filed the proper documents with the council. They agreed on where the battle would happen. They calculated how many soldiers would die. Computer simulations ran through every possibility, and when the numbers showed a clear winner, everyone accepted it. Sometimes they fought anyway, but only in the designated areas and only until the predicted outcome became reality. This saved resources. This saved lives. This was how advanced beings handled conflict. The council met in a massive station that orbited a dead star. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered there, but everyone knew who really made the decisions. The Big Five sat on elevated platforms looking down at everyone else. They had done this for so long that they could not imagine it any other way. Then the human ship appeared. The vessel was small and awkward-looking compared to the sleek warships of the Krell or the geometric perfection of Helios craft. It moved through space like a child learning to walk, its engines leaving a trail that every sensor could track from 1,000,000 miles away. The Council's defense fleet surrounded it immediately, weapons ready, but the human ship just stopped and waited. A message came through in broken galactic standard language. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the exploration ship Frontier. We come in peace. We wish to talk." The Council was amused. A new species barely able to travel between stars asking to join their perfect system. They granted permission for the humans to dock, mostly out of curiosity. Jake Morrison was the first human most aliens had ever seen. He was tall by human standards but small compared to the Vakram. His skin was soft with no natural armor or protective scales. He smiled easily, showing blunt teeth that could not tear through metal or crack bone. With him came 3 others. Lisa Bennett served as his second in command, her eyes constantly watching everything with military precision. Ryan Hughes handled tactical operations, his young face serious as he studied every alien species they encountered. Sam Carter was their chief engineer, her hands stained with grease from keeping their primitive ship running. The council chamber was enormous. Thousands of beings watched as the 4 humans walked to the center of the room. Ambassador Vector of the Vakram leaned forward on his platform, his compound eyes examining them like insects under glass. He clicked his mandibles together in what might have been laughter. "So these are humans," he said, his translator turning his clicking sounds into words everyone could understand. "You are very small, very soft. What resources do you bring to the council? What military strength? What trade goods?" Jake Morrison stood straight and answered honestly. "We have 32 ships capable of deep space travel. Our weapons technology is basic. We have 12 colony worlds with about 50 million people total. We do not have much to offer except our willingness to learn and to contribute what we can." First Scholar Helion 7 of the crystalline Helios species processed this information in microseconds. Its body pulsed with light as it calculated. "Your faster-than-light drive is primitive, based on theories we abandoned 8,000 cycles ago. Your weapons are chemical rockets and basic energy beams. Your total military capacity is less than a single Krell carrier group. Why should we accept you into our council?" Lisa Bennett spoke up, her voice firm. "Because we want to learn. Because we believe in cooperation between species. Because we think we can grow and become valuable members of this community." Fleet Commander Croth of the Krell made a gurgling sound that translated as dismissive laughter. "You have nothing we need, but you are entertaining. We will grant you provisional membership. You may colonize in Sector 779, far from any important worlds. Follow our laws. Pay your taxes. Perhaps in a few thousand years you will become worthy of notice." The Montari representative calculated the potential profit from human trade. The Zenith diplomat Elder Mora felt something unusual about these newcomers but said nothing. The council voted. and humanity was admitted to the galactic community with barely any discussion. Jake Morrison thanked them, keeping his face neutral, even though he understood they had just been dismissed as unimportant. As the human delegation left the chamber, Ryan Hughes whispered, "They think we are nothing. Let them think that," Lisa Bennett replied quietly. "We will show them what humans can do when given a chance." The four humans returned to their ship and began the long journey back to Earth. Behind them, the Council had already forgotten about humanity. They were too small, too weak, too primitive to matter. The galaxy continued its perfect routine, its calculated wars, its organized peace. None of them understood what they had just allowed into their ordered universe. None of them knew that humans did not think like them. Humans did not calculate acceptable losses or surrender when mathematics said they should. Humans did not fight wars in designated zones with agreed-upon rules. Humans had spent their entire history fighting each other in the most terrible ways imaginable, and they had learned lessons that 3,000 years of civilized warfare had forgotten. The galaxy had existed in careful balance for so long. Every species knew their place. Every conflict had a predicted outcome. Every war ended when logic said it should. But humans did not always follow logic. Humans fought for things that could not be calculated. Humans died for ideas and beliefs in homes and families. Humans had a word for fighting without rules, without limits, without surrender. They called it survival. And the galaxy was about to learn what that word really meant. The frontier jumped into faster-than-light travel, leaving the Council station behind. In a few months, everything would change. The perfect order would crack. And it would all start with a small colony world that refused to obey the rules. New Terra was beautiful in a way that made settlers forget they were light years from Earth. The forests grew thick with trees that looked almost like oaks and pines, even though they had evolved on a completely different world. Rivers ran clear and cold from mountains that reminded people of home. The sky was a little more purple than blue, and the sun was a little more orange than yellow. But after 6 months, nobody noticed anymore. 15,000 people had made New Terra their home. They built houses from local wood and stone. They planted crops that grew surprisingly well in the alien soil. Children played in streets that smelled like fresh bread and engine oil. Paul Briggs served as governor, elected by the colonists because he had a reputation for getting things done. He was a thick-shouldered man with gray in his beard and hands that showed a lifetime of hard work. Before coming to New Terra, he had been a construction foreman on Mars. He knew how to build things and he knew how to lead people. Life was good. Hard but good. Everyone worked, everyone contributed, and slowly they were creating something permanent. Something worth protecting. The Vakrim warships came out of faster-than-light travel on an ordinary Tuesday morning. 6 massive vessels, each one larger than any building in the colony capital. They moved into orbit with practiced precision, their weapons already charged and ready. Commander Kresh led the fleet from his flagship. He had done this operation 47 times before on 47 different worlds. It was always the same. Arrive, demand surrender. Accept the colony's submission, file the paperwork with the Council. Most species understood the rules. The Vakrim had claimed this sector through proper legal channels. Any settlements found here belonged to them by galactic law. The humans would be relocated, given compensation, and everyone would move on. He opened a communication channel to the surface. Attention New Terra colony. This world has been claimed by the Vakrim Dominion under Council Regulation 735. You have 6 standard hours to prepare for evacuation. Resistance is not permitted. The response came from Governor Briggs himself. The human's voice was calm but carried an edge that Kresh had never heard before. Commander, with respect, this is our home. We have invested 3 years of our lives building this colony. Our children were born here. We are not leaving. Kresh was confused. You do not understand. This is law. You must comply. No, Briggs said simply. We will defend our home. This was unexpected. Kresh pulled up the intelligence files on humanity. 32 warships total, all far away. This colony had no orbital defenses, no military garrison, no heavy weapons. Just civilian settlers with whatever tools they had brought for farming and construction. The idea of resistance was illogical. He sent down a battalion of warriors to encourage cooperation. 240 Vakrim soldiers, each one 3 meters tall and armored in biometallic shells that could stop most small arms fire. They carried plasma rifles that could burn through steel. They had trained for decades in combat. This would be a simple show of force, nothing more. The dropships landed outside the colony capital. The Vakrim battalion formed up in perfect ranks and began marching toward the main settlement. Their commander, a veteran named Thrak, expected to see frightened civilians hiding in their homes. Instead, he saw empty streets and closed doors. The first explosion destroyed his lead squad. An improvised bomb buried under the road. Detonated by someone watching from a window, 7 warriors died instantly. The rest scattered, seeking cover, their training taking over. That was when the shooting started. The humans fired from windows, from rooftops, from underground tunnels. They used hunting rifles designed for local wildlife. They threw homemade explosives made from mining charges. They set traps in doorways and alleys. They fought like people who had nothing to lose and everything to protect. The Vakrim were superior soldiers with better weapons and armor. But they had never fought an enemy like this. Every building was a fortress. Every civilian was potentially armed. The humans did not wear uniforms or follow any tactics the Vakrim recognized. They just fought with desperate efficiency. A human woman named Kate Dixon held a position in a school building for 3 hours, with just a rifle and 40 rounds of ammunition. She killed 6 Vakrim warriors before they finally brought the building down on her. A farmer named Joe Turner used his tractor as a battering ram, crashing into a Vakrim squad and dying when they returned fire, but taking 8 of them with him. A teenage boy named Chris led the Vakrim into a warehouse filled with fuel drums, then detonated them, sacrificing himself to destroy an entire platoon. The Vakrim had better everything, but the humans had rage and fear and love for their homes. They fought from sewers. They attacked wounded soldiers. They refused to surrender even when surrounded. They did things that no civilized species would do in warfare, because they were not fighting a war. They were fighting for survival. Commander Thrak sent a message to the flagship as his own armor burned from a chemical weapon no database had predicted. They do not fight like soldiers. They fight like cornered animals. They fight like demons. What kind of species does this? Then something exploded near him, and his transmission ended. Commander Kresh watched from orbit in growing horror as his battalion markers disappeared one by one from his tactical display. This was impossible. The mathematics showed clear Vakrim victory. The humans had inferior numbers, inferior weapons, inferior training. But they were winning. When only 18 of his 240 warriors made it back to the dropships, Kresh made a decision that would have been unthinkable 6 hours ago. He ordered a full retreat. His fleet jumped back into faster-than-light travel, leaving New Terra behind. The humans had won, not through superior force or tactics, but through sheer refusal to accept defeat. On the surface, Governor Briggs stood in the smoking ruins of his colony's main street. 42 colonists had died. The school was destroyed. 3 warehouses had burned. But they had held their ground. Kate Dixon's husband found her body in the rubble of the school. Joe Turner's family buried him next to the field he had been planting. Chris's mother could not stop crying for 3 days, but New Terra was still theirs. Briggs sent a message to Earth reporting what had happened. Then he gathered the survivors and began rebuilding. They buried their dead with honor. They salvaged what they could from the Vakrim equipment left behind. They reinforced their defenses because they knew more would come. Commander Kresh reported to the Vakrim High Command, and they reported to the Council. The galaxy learned that humans had defeated a superior military force. The Council was shocked. The mathematical models had been wrong. The assumptions about acceptable warfare had been challenged. Species across the galaxy read the reports and wondered, if humans could resist the Vakrim, what did that mean for the established order? If calculated warfare could be defeated by those who refused to follow the rules, what happened to 3,000 years of stability? The answer was simple, though nobody wanted to admit it yet. Everything was about to change. The emergency council session began with anger. Ambassador Vector of the Vakrim stood at his platform, his compound eyes burning with rage that his translator could barely convey. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he spoke, each word sharp and cutting. The humans have committed an act of barbarism, he declared to the assembled representatives. They did not file proper battle documentation. They did not accept mathematical projections of defeat. They used civilian populations as military forces. They employed tactics that resulted in casualties far beyond projected parameters. They fought like savages and they must be punished. First, Scholar Helion 7 pulsed with agreement, its crystalline body reflecting light in patterns that showed calculation and analysis. Our models predicted human surrender within 2 standard hours. Instead, they fought for 6 hours and achieved victory against a superior force. This represents a fundamental flaw in their psychological makeup. They are irrational. They risk everything for emotional attachment to geographic locations. This is primitive behavior that threatens the stability of our civilization. Across the chamber, representatives from hundreds of species watched and listened. Some were horrified by human actions. Others were quietly fascinated. A few were thinking thoughts they had not allowed themselves to think in centuries. Fleet Commander Kroth of the Krell species spoke next, his voice bubbling through his translation device. I agree that human tactics were unconventional. However, we must acknowledge a simple fact: they won. Against all projections, against superior force, they achieved their objective. Perhaps we should seek to understand how this was possible before we condemn them. Elder Mora of the Sanith raised one delicate hand, requesting attention. She was old even by her species' long standards, and her voice carried the weight of experience. I propose we send negotiators to speak with humanity before we make any decisions. They are new to our community. Perhaps they simply do not understand our ways. Violence should be our last option, not our first. But the Montari trade representative was already calculating the economic impact. If human unpredictability spreads, it will destabilize our markets. Trade depends on predictable outcomes. We cannot function in chaos. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was becoming clear. The powerful species of the Council had been embarrassed. A small, weak, primitive species had defied them and won. That could not be allowed to stand. Not because of justice or law, but because of pride and fear. A coalition began to form. Vakrim warriors wanted revenge. Krell admirals saw an opportunity to prove their fleets were superior. Montari traders wanted stability restored. Together they represented overwhelming force. The vote was called. 60 warships would be assembled. They would travel to Earth itself and force humanity to submit to Council authority. The humans would dismantle their military, accept occupation, and learn their place in the galactic order. This would not be a raid on a distant colony. This would be a demonstration of power that everyone would see and remember. Elder Mora voted against the action, but she was alone. On Earth, in a military command center deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, Admiral Helen Price read the intelligence reports with steady eyes. She was 58 years old and had spent 40 years in various military positions, from submarine officer to fleet commander. Her hair had gone gray, but her mind remained sharp as ever. "They are coming," she said to the officers assembled in the briefing room. 60 warships. Vakrim, Krell, and Montari forces. They will be here in 4 weeks. Colonel Danny Blake, her chief tactical officer, pulled up holographic displays showing the enemy fleet composition. Each ship was larger and more powerful than anything humanity possessed. "We have 32 ships, Admiral. Most of our crews have never fired weapons in actual combat. The mathematics are not in our favor." Captain Jake Morrison, recently returned from the frontier, stood near the back of the room. He had spent months traveling between Earth and New Terra, hearing first-hand accounts of the battle from survivors. The Vakrim thought mathematics were on their side too. The colonists proved them wrong. Admiral Price nodded slowly. "The question is not whether we can win by conventional standards. The question is whether we can make victory too costly for them to accept. We need to think like the colonists did, like humans always have when our backs are against the wall." She pulled up a star chart showing Earth's solar system. "We have 4 weeks to prepare. We are not going to fight their kind of war. We are going to fight ours." Over the next weeks, Earth transformed into a fortress. Every ship that could fly was retrofitted with weapons. Mining vessels got missile pods. Freight haulers received railguns. Personal yachts were loaded with explosives. The orbital shipyards worked around the clock, not building new warships but converting civilian craft into weapons. Colonel Blake coordinated with every military installation on Earth and throughout the solar system. Marines, Navy personnel, Air Force pilots, Army soldiers, everyone prepared for a battle that would decide humanity's future. Captain Morrison worked with civilian volunteers, thousands of them, people who owned ships and wanted to defend their home. They were not soldiers, but they were willing to fight. A freighter captain named Jenny Cole signed up her ship and crew. A transport pilot named Ben Foster installed weapons on his vessel with his own hands. Dock workers, miners, merchants, all of them prepared to stand against the coming storm. Admiral Price met with Earth's government leaders and explained the situation with complete honesty. We will likely lose half our ships. Thousands of people will die. But if we do not fight, humanity will become a subject species forever. We will never be allowed to govern ourselves. Our children will grow up under alien rule. That is the choice. The leaders authorized her to take any action necessary to defend Earth. In the final days before the enemy fleet arrived, Price walked through her flagship's corridors, seeing the faces of young officers who might not survive the week. She stopped to talk with them, learning their names, hearing about their families. She wanted to remember them. On the bridge, Ryan Hughes ran simulations over and over, trying to find some tactical advantage. Every simulation showed human defeat. He kept running them anyway, looking for patterns, for possibilities. Lisa Bennett organized the defensive grid, placing ships and platforms in positions that broke every rule of conventional fleet engagement. The formations looked chaotic, random, but there was method in the madness. Sam Carter jury-rigged weapons systems that the original designers would have called impossible. She linked civilian ships into the military command network, creating a fleet that operated more like a swarm than an organized navy. When the enemy fleet's arrival was 6 hours away, Admiral Price broadcast a message to every human ship and station. Her voice was calm, but everyone could hear the steel beneath her words. In a few hours, the galaxy's great powers will arrive at our home. They come to force us to submit to prove we are weak. They believe we will surrender because their mathematics say we should. They believe we will follow their rules because that is how civilized species behave. They are wrong. We are human. We do not surrender our freedom. We do not abandon our home. We fight, not because we think we can win, but because some things are worth dying for. Show them what that means. The fleet prepared. Weapons charged. Crews took their positions. Earth itself held its breath, waiting. The enemy fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 60 warships, each one a masterpiece of military engineering, arranged in patterns that had been proven optimal through 10,000 computer simulations. Supreme Commander Vectar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominance, watching his tactical displays with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding as calculated. He opened a communication channel to Earth, speaking in the formal diplomatic language of the Council. His translator carried his words across space to reach every human ship and station. Humans of Earth, you have violated galactic law through your actions on New Terra. You have demonstrated contempt for proper warfare protocols. You have shown yourselves unfit for membership in civilized society. Therefore, the Council has authorized this compliance action. You will submit to our authority immediately. You will dismantle your military forces. You will accept occupation and re-education. You have 1 standard hour to comply with these demands. From her flagship, Admiral Helen Price listened to the ultimatum with no expression on her face. Around her, the bridge crew waited for her response. She let the silence stretch for a moment, then keyed her microphone. No. Vectar's mandibles clicked in confusion. You do not understand your situation. You have 32 military vessels. We have 60, each superior to yours in firepower, shielding, and maneuverability. Our computer analysis gives you a 0.003% chance of achieving victory. Your defeat is mathematically certain. Why do you refuse to accept reality? Admiral Price smiled, though Vectar could not see it. Because, Commander, you are not fighting 32 ships. You are fighting for our home, and you have no idea what that means. She cut the communication and turned to her tactical officer. Colonel Blake, execute Operation Chaos. What happened next would be studied for generations. The human military fleet did not move into any recognized battle formation. Instead, Captain Jake Morrison's destroyer Defiance led a group of 8 ships directly toward the enemy center. Not to engage in combat, but to scatter them. The ships moved fast, weapons blazing, not trying to destroy but to disrupt. The coalition fleet broke formation to pursue these ships, exactly as Admiral Price had predicted. Alien commanders thought in terms of tactical advantage and optimal positioning. They saw human ships breaking away and instinctively moved to destroy them. That was when Earth's planetary defenses activated. But these were not the orbital weapons platforms that every civilization used. Instead, thousands of small craft emerged from hiding positions behind the moon, from Earth's orbital stations, even from within the atmosphere. These were not warships. They were mining vessels and freight haulers and personal yachts and survey craft. Civilian ships, each one modified with whatever weapons humans could mount on them. They swarmed toward the coalition fleet like angry insects. Captain Jenny Cole piloted a converted transport ship called the Lucky Stars. Her normal cargo was medical supplies between Mars and Earth. Now her cargo bay was filled with mining explosives, and she flew directly toward a Krell cruiser that had broken formation. Her crew of 4 stayed with her, knowing what was about to happen. For humanity, she said calmly into her microphone, then crashed her ship directly into the cruiser's shield generator. The explosion destroyed the Lucky Stars instantly. Jenny Cole and her crew died without pain, but the cruiser's shields collapsed and 3 human destroyers tore it apart with concentrated fire. Commander Croth, watching from his carrier, felt something he had never experienced in battle. Fear. Not for himself, but for the fundamental nature of reality. These humans were not trying to win by superior tactics. They were making victory too costly to accept. The battle turned into chaos that no computer could have predicted. Everywhere Croth looked, human ships were sacrificing themselves to create opportunities for other human ships. A mining vessel rammed a Vakrim destroyer. A freight hauler loaded with missiles flew into a formation of fighters and detonated. A yacht carrying a family of volunteers crashed into a command ship's bridge. Captain Ben Foster commanded a freighter that had been converted into a missile platform. He had worked in freight transport for 20 years before the war started. Now he sat in his captain's chair, launching missile after missile at Vakrim fighters that strafed his position. His shields failed. His hull breached. His crew abandoned ship when he ordered them to. But Ben Foster kept firing until his ship broke apart around him, and in his final moments, he took down 7 enemy craft. Admiral Price led the main human fleet in a devastating strike against the enemy flagship. The Dominance's shields were designed to withstand calculated naval combat. They were not designed for the insane suicide runs and concentrated fire of an enemy that seemed to care nothing for its own survival. Ryan Hughes coordinated the attack from the tactical station, his fingers moving across holographic controls as he tracked hundreds of ships simultaneously. He identified weak points and directed fire with precision that surprised even himself. He was not thinking anymore, just reacting, using instincts the Helios computers could not calculate. Lisa Bennett commanded a group of destroyers that operated more like pack hunters than a military formation. They struck fast from unexpected angles, then disappeared into the chaos before enemy ships could respond effectively. Sam Carter kept the flagship's weapons running past their theoretical limits, ignoring safety protocols and manufacturer specifications. When one system overheated and failed, she routed power through backup systems that were not designed to handle it. When those systems began to fail, she found new ways to keep the ship fighting. Supreme Commander Vectar watched his tactical display with growing horror. The mathematical models showed certain victory, but reality showed something completely different. His fleet was being torn apart not by superior technology or tactics, but by an enemy willing to pay any price for victory. They are insane, he whispered to himself. They are all insane. A human corvette crashed into one of his escort ships, killing everyone aboard both vessels. A converted mining ship detonated against his flagship's shields, weakening them. 3 human destroyers fired in perfect coordination, and his ship shuddered under the impact. Commander Croth sent a message to Vectar. We must retreat. We cannot win this battle at any acceptable cost. Vectar wanted to refuse. His pride demanded that he stay and destroy these primitive humans. But he was also a commander who understood reality. His fleet had lost 19 ships. Thousands of his warriors were dead, and the humans showed no sign of stopping, no matter how many of them died. He gave the order to retreat. The coalition fleet jumped back into faster-than-light travel, leaving Earth's space behind. On the bridge of her damaged flagship, Admiral Price watched them go with tears running down her face. Not tears of joy, but of grief. 22 of her 32 warships were destroyed or too damaged to repair. Over 3,000 humans had died, including Jenny Cole and Ben Foster and hundreds of others whose names she had tried to remember. The victory had been bought with blood and lives and sacrifice that no mathematical model could capture. Supreme Commander. Vector sent one final message before his fleet disappeared into faster-than-light travel. His voice carried confusion and something that might have been respect. "This is not war. This is madness," Admiral Price replied quietly, knowing he would not hear her. "This is humanity. Remember it. Earth began counting its dead and mourning its heroes. The battle was over, but the war for humanity's place in the galaxy had just begun." The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Representatives from hundreds of species sat in stunned silence as the reports from Earth were displayed for everyone to see. Ship after ship destroyed, warrior after warrior killed, a superior force retreating in defeat from a primitive species that should have surrendered immediately. Supreme Commander Vector stood before the council, his compound eyes dim with shame. He was a veteran of 50 campaigns, a warrior whose tactical genius had been celebrated across the galaxy. Now he was the commander who had lost to humans. "They do not fight like any species we have encountered," he reported, his voice carrying through the translation devices. "They do not calculate acceptable losses. They do not surrender when mathematics shows defeat. They sacrifice themselves without hesitation if it achieves their goals. Every civilian ship became a weapon. Every person became a soldier. We could have destroyed them eventually, but the cost would have been our entire fleet." First Scholar Helion 7 processed this information, its crystalline form pulsing with light as it ran simulation after simulation. The mathematical models cannot account for their behavior. They operate outside rational parameters. This makes them dangerous in ways we cannot predict. Fleet Commander Croth spoke, his voice bubbling through his translator. "Perhaps. But consider another possibility. Perhaps we have forgotten something important about warfare. We have made it so civilized, so calculated that we no longer understand what it means to fight for survival." The chamber erupted in debate. Some species called for another larger attack on humanity. Others warned that such action would be too costly. A few suggested negotiation, though they were shouted down by those who saw compromise as weakness. But something else was happening across the galaxy. On colony worlds far from the Council's core systems, people who had lived under the domination of the great powers were watching. They saw that the Council could be resisted. They saw that sometimes determination mattered more than superior weapons. Uprisings began on 12 worlds within a week. Minor species refused to pay tribute. Colonies declared independence. Trade routes were disrupted as merchant ships were seized by populations tired of serving the interests of distant powers. The careful order of 3,000 cycles was cracking, and every crack spread further. The Council faced a choice. They could try to crush every rebellion, fighting wars on a dozen fronts against enemies who had learned from humanity's example. Or they could accept that the old order was dead and something new needed to be built. Elder Mora of the Zenith requested permission to travel to Earth as a diplomatic envoy. The Council, seeing few other options, agreed. She departed immediately, her small ship making the journey alone and unarmed, a gesture of peaceful intent. Admiral Helen Price received her in a simple conference room, not the grand chambers where the Council conducted its business. With Price were Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, and Lisa Bennett, who had been given command of Earth's reconstructed fleet. Elder Mora was old, even for a species that lived for centuries. Her skin had the translucent quality of ancient parchment, and her eyes held depths that spoke of long experience. She looked at the three humans for a long moment before speaking. "The galaxy is changing," she said simply. "Your actions have broken something that many believed could never break. The question now is what will be built to replace it." Admiral Price gestured for her to sit. "We did not want war. We wanted to be left alone to live our lives, but we will not submit to domination no matter the cost." "I understand," Mora replied. "That is why I have come. Not to threaten, but to ask for your help. The Council is fragmenting. Species are rebelling. Everything is becoming chaos. We need something new, and I believe humans understand something we have forgotten." "What is that?" Morrison asked. "Why beings fight?" Mora said quietly. "Not for tactical advantage or economic gain, but for things that matter. For homes and families and freedom. You fight not because you want to, but because some things are worth defending. Teach us this. Help us rebuild the galaxy into something better than it was." The three humans exchanged glances. This was not what they had expected. They had prepared for more war, not for peace. Admiral Price considered carefully before responding. The Council must understand something first. We will not be subjects. We will not follow laws we had no voice in creating. If there is to be a new order, it must be built by all species together, not imposed by the powerful on the weak. Agreed, Morris said. That is why I propose humanity join the Council not as provisional members, but as full equals. More than that, we ask that you help restructure our military forces, not to teach us your tactics, but to teach us your philosophy. Over the following months, negotiations continued. The Council offered humanity a new deal. Earth would be recognized as a sovereign power with full voting rights. Human colonies would be protected under galactic law. In exchange, humans would contribute to a reformed Council military structure that combined traditional tactics with human adaptability. Admiral Jake Morrison was given command of the Combined Fleet Initiative, a new organization that brought together ships and personnel from all Council species. It was revolutionary. Vakrim warriors trained alongside human marines. Krell admirals learned to work with officers who did not follow their rigid protocols. Helios strategists tried to incorporate human unpredictability into their calculations and found themselves thinking in new ways. Commander Kresh, the Vakrim officer who had survived the battle at New Terra, requested assignment to Morrison's fleet. When they met for the first time since that terrible day, Kresh studied the human carefully. I attacked your colony, Kresh said through his translator. I killed your people. Why do you accept me? Morrison thought about it for a moment. Because that battle taught both of us something important. You learned that superior force does not guarantee victory. We learned that we could defend ourselves. Now we can work together and both be stronger for it. Kresh clicked his mandibles in what might have been approval. You are either very wise or very foolish. I am not certain which. Maybe both, Morrison replied with a smile. The transformation was slow. Many species resisted change. Some refused to accept human involvement in galactic affairs. But gradually, over years and then decades, the galaxy changed. Wars became less common not because of mathematical calculations, but because species learned to fight for things that truly mattered, and to seek solutions before reaching that point. The ritualized battles that had dominated for 3,000 cycles gave way to real diplomacy, backed by forces that understood both discipline and determination. On New Terra, now protected by a joint human Vakrim garrison that stood guard over the colonists rather than threatening them, Governor Paul Briggs dedicated a memorial to those who had fallen defending their home. The monument was simple, just a wall with names carved into local stone. At the top, a plaque bore an inscription in both human and galactic standard languages. They came for our home. We showed them it was worth defending. Similar memorials appeared on worlds across the galaxy. Species that had never thought to resist oppression now understood they had that right. The age of calculated warfare had ended. The age of fighting for what truly mattered had begun. Admiral Helen Price, now retired but still respected throughout the galaxy, gave a speech at a council gathering 5 years after the battle for Earth. Representatives from hundreds of species listened as she spoke. We did not set out to change your civilization, she said. We only wanted to protect our homes and our freedom. But in doing so, we reminded you of something you had forgotten. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the result of everyone being willing to defend what they believe in, and respecting others who do the same. We fought not because we loved war, but because we loved what we were defending. That is the difference. The galaxy had claimed to know battle for 3,000 years. They had refined it, calculated it, made it civilized and predictable. Then humanity showed them war. Real war, desperate war. War fought by people who had everything to lose and nothing left to bargain with. And in showing them war, humanity taught them peace. Not the false peace of submission and mathematical certainty, but the real peace of mutual respect and shared purpose. The galaxy would never be the same. And that, Admiral Price thought as she looked out at the assembled species, was exactly as it should be. Human ships now traveled freely between the stars, not as subjects or provisional members, but as equals. Children on Earth and New Terra and a dozen other colonies looked up at the night sky and saw not limits but possibilities. The future was uncertain, chaotic, unpredictable. It was human, and the galaxy, slowly learning to embrace that chaos, was becoming something better than it had been. Something worth defending, something worth fighting for,